So currently we have this setup where actually we have sort of smooth camera transition. Plus when we equip a firearm weapon, we can aim it, right? So the camera states is being updated seamlessly, right? So now what I need to add is sort of like camera transition for sprinting and some camera transition to the interactive elements, right? Okay, so first I will do the sprint camera stuffs, right? So you can go to the DT camera data table and let's add sprint camera state, and I'll name the row as sprint camera, and as the values, the spring arm length I can keep it as 500. Maybe camera location, I'm not quite sure. Maybe like let's give it the default CFC that we have in the medium camera. And yeah, this one I'm interested, which is the field of view, right? Because like for the cameras currently we have the field of view of 90 degree, and I just added this field on the very early episode when we first constructed this data structure called S camera settings. So there I haven't explained what we need this field of view for. So basically like we need a field of view to actually manipulate how much sort of a view that can be camera can capture on the runtime, right? So currently by default it's 90, but just for testing maybe let's give it as 80 and let's see how it works. Okay, but of course if I give it like this it won't work, because at the camera manager I haven't implemented the functionality to manipulate the camera field of view yet, right? So let's add that feature there so we can see how it works, right? So I'll sort of clean up this stuff, right? So maybe like I need the player and character, and rest of the stuff I can close it, right? So let's go to the camera manager, and there let's create a new event somewhat similar to these two stuffs, right? So I'll create a new event called update camera field of view, FOV, right? So let's get the camera reference converted to validated get, and then if it is valid I'm going to add a timeline which is TM camera FOV, and as the timeline let's add a float track which returns the alpha value, and I'll use the external curve CF generic camera curve, which is the same curve that we used in both update location and the update spring arm length, right? Compile and save, and let's get the field of view value, right, of the camera, and then lerp it with whatever the target FOV that we need, right? So I'll parameterize that value called target FOV, and as the alpha value we can plug whatever the alpha provided by this timeline, and then let's set field of value which is the updated value whenever it's updating for each frame, and this should happen at the play from start instead of play. And similarly what we have been done to the other timelines, let's give it a freedom to manipulate the play rate as well. So let's get the camera FOV and let's set the play rate and parameterize this one called play rate. Right. And also let's give it a default value 1 because by default it should be 1. And I think in the previous tutorial I forgot to add the default value to the update camera location play rate. So let's add it here as well. Okay. Now we have the capability to update the camera FOV. So let's plug it to the set camera state function. So I'll call this event and we need the field of view which comes from our data structure, and the play rate I can use whatever the play rate currently we have. And let's organize the pins a little bit because I think it's too much cluttered right now. Okay, now it's look much more cleaner. Right, so then what we need is we have to detect when we sprint, and whenever we sprint we have to simply manipulate that camera state, right? So at the character base, do we have the toggle sprint? At the player base, I think we have. At the player base, I have added this functionality actually to set the sprint explicitly by directly calling the BPC locomotion system. But I think it would be nice if we generalize this functionality and move it to weapons category as well, because for example, let's say sometimes when we equipped different types of weapon, maybe we shouldn't be able to sprint, right? For example, let's say if I equipped a rocket launcher or a grenade launcher or whatever the heavy weapon, then in such scenarios actually like the character can't sprint, right? Or maybe like if he equip a rifle or pistol, then yes, he can sprint, okay? So in order to control those behaviors based on whatever the weapon that you have been equipped, I think it's better if we move this functionality to weapon system itself. Not the weapon system explicitly, but the weapon base implementation, right? So anyway, first I will create a similar function like this at the where at the camera base, at the character base. So let's create a new event called toggle sprint, and we should sprint and we should check the weapon system current slots, because now we are going to implement whatever the sprinting logic at the weapon system itself, and then I should consume an input parameter called is pressed. So let's implement a new BPI event, which is BPI sprint. Move it to weapons category, and then let's add a new input called is pressed. Then let's go back to the character base and I can call BPI sprint there. right? And is pressed, should be connected like this. Then I can go to the player base again, and for now I'll disconnect these two pins. Instead let's use toggle sprint. At the started it should be pressed, and at the completed it should be not pressed, right? Now if you play test it and actually try to sprint, it can't sprint because we haven't implemented the set sprinting capabilities for the blueprint interface functions at our weapon base, right? So let's go to the weapon base, and there I'll implement this new interface function, which is BPI sprint, right? So here also I will capture the states and mark it as is printing, right? And then what? Then I can check whether the owner of the weapon instance have the locomotion system or not, right? So let's get the owner reference and let's get the locomotion system of the owner, right? I can check whether it is valid or not. So if we have a valid reference only, we can make a sprint transition, right? Because if you remember at the character base, not the character base, essentially like that, the player base, we are calling that set sprinting via this BPC locomotion system reference, right? So similar thing has been done over here, right? So let's get the set sprint function call and plug it to here. All right, now let's test and see. Now you can see at the unarmed mode I can sprint. Plus let's equip a weapon and try to sprint, and at the armed mode also, or at the firearm weapon mode also, I can sprint. Okay, but the camera states are not manipulating, so let's add that capabilities as well. So how can I decide which camera state that I should go? Right, first let's get the what? Let's get first we have to check whether our owner is a player or not. So let's get the character, check whether it's player controlled or not, because if it is a player controlled, then it is a player, right? Otherwise for the NPCs actually we don't need essentially to make a camera transition, because those NPCs doesn't have a camera, right? So when the NPCs are sprinting, we don't need to manipulate the player camera, right? Otherwise what will happen is, like, when a specific NPC is trying to sprint, the player's camera will also be manipulated, which is not what we want, right? Therefore we have to first check whether we are a player or not, whoever they equipped this weapon. So if it is a player, then we can get the player camera manager and set the camera state. So the camera state will be vary based on whether we are sprinting or not. So let's say if we are sprinting, right? we are sprinting, then we can make a selection, right? And if we are sprinting, it goes to the sprinting camera. Otherwise, what it should do, otherwise it should go to the default camera state whatever this weapon have, right? So inside the weapon config, let's break it, and here we have the camera state. It should go back to that camera state. Okay, right. So let's play test and see. Okay, now you can see like when I try to sprint, sort of field of view is being applied. Also the camera location has been updated, but it almost not noticeable enough because it's too much closer location. I spring up value for the sprint. So maybe I will increase this further, maybe like 600. And I think the field of view is too much. Maybe like we can make it as, I don't know, maybe 85. Now let's try to sprint it back. Okay, now you can see when the character is sprinting, the camera moves backward. Plus we can see like a focused field of view. The field of view also been manipulated. Maybe we can reduce the spring arm length to maybe 550, and let's increase little bit this field of view. Maybe 88 would do the trick. Right, now if I try to sprint, okay, now the field of view is been manipulated and it's not very very strength event. So the field of view is also manipulated, and I think still I'm not happy with the distance of the target arm length. Maybe 510 would do it. Let's play. Yeah, I think 510 would be nice, right? Because the camera should go little bit backward when you are sprinting, right? Not a whole. Okay, so let's equip a rifle and see how this sprinting works. Okay, I can see when we are sprinting also the camera goes to that state, and when we stop the sprinting, it goes back to the close up combat camera mode, and we can do the aiming, sprinting, everything works seamlessly. Okay, right, I think that's how we can implement the sprinting camera. Maybe let's go to the weapon base. Yeah, and I thinking like maybe we can generalize this functionality as well, whether this guy is player or not, this checking. Maybe we can create a specific BFA utility function to that as well. So let's create it, and I'll call it on as is player. This one simply a return value, call whether this one is a player or not. return value. So for that I can get the character with the owner reference, and if this one is valid reference, then we can check whether this one is player controlled or not. Or additionally, we can maybe tag the player as well, right? For example, at the player base, if you select the defaults, class defaults, there is a one called tags, right? So you can specifically tag the player as well. For example, like let's say in a distinction between NPCs and players, maybe you can add a tag called player for the player base, and maybe you can add different NPC tags for the NPC characters, right? These tags also comes in useful fashion when you are determining whether the character is a player or not. But I'm not going to add any tags right now, but I will add that capability to the BFA utility function, right? So when the time comes, actually we will see how it benefits for us, right? So in order to check the tags, let's use the actor hashtag functionality, and if we have a tag called player, also we can determine that's a player or not. And I think it's not even necessary to be a character, maybe any own actor we can tag it as a player, right? Maybe for example, let's say I don't know, maybe like let's say the character is controlling a tank, or maybe a I don't know, like machine gun or something, then the pawn state should be transit to that specific controlled actor, right? So in such scenarios, like we can determine those stuff by tagging those actors, right? Because those are not essentially characters but multiple different blueprints, right? So if either of these condition is true, then potentially that's a player character if we have a valid reference. Or we don't need to even have a valid reference. So let's do it like this: is valid and then it's true, else false. Okay, we have valid reference, and if it is a player control, then that's a player. Or for any given generic actor, if it has the tag called player, then it is a player, right? So at the weapon base, let's select for these references, and let's globally check where we have that reference. Yeah, so this BFA utility reference is the reference that we have, which is fine. And at the weapon base we have this reference, so let's replace it. I'll use is player. So this one is for sprinting, right? Let's check that one. Alright, it's working, which means the reference is working properly. And then we have another reference at get race location. This one is for weapon aiming, I believe. So let's replace that as well, so we don't have the cloud duplication there. And let's go to the camera transform. There also we don't need this one, instead we can use like this, and we can get rid of this one, and we can use is player, right? So it will simplify the code, and we don't have the duplicated code, right? So we did the change to get camera transform functionality and get trace location functionality, right? I just replaced those duplicated code. But now we have to check the camera aiming as well. For that I will go to the npc map and let's first check whether this guy is aiming for us properly. Right, it's aiming properly for our multiple different skeletal bones. And let me equip a weapon as well. So I don't have a weapon. Maybe I'll go to the weapons level and I'll check the weapons. Let's see whether I can aim. Yeah, I can also aim properly and the trace location seems working fine. Okay. Yeah, so those are actually not directly comply with the sprint camera transitions, but I just noticed like we have sort of a duplicated code here and there, right? So we have to prevent such code duplications when we are making software actually, like not this essentially games. You have to remove those duplicate code. So I just found it on this one, right? At our weapon base, when we are sprinting, I checked whether this one is a player or not. So that code was duplicated. That's why I removed the duplicated references here and there. Plus, at the player base, now I can see we don't need these instances, so I can get rid of those stuff. Right. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to cover in this section. In the next tutorial, let's cover like how we can add the far camera, right? For maybe like exploration interactivities or like vehicle interactions. Okay, I'll see you there. Thank you.